Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly Urenker. I'm the Vice President for the Center for Philanthropy here at the Pittsburgh Foundation. And I'm just going to go over a few logistics that we have for today. We are recording this session. So if you are on camera, you will be part of that recording. Feel free to stand up, get around, turn your camera off if you're not comfortable with being on camera. There will be plenty of opportunities for questions. You can also use the chat feature to ask questions as we go along. And then Jamillia Kamara, my colleague, you may see on screen, will moderate the panel and the questions at the end. And then at the end, Lindsay Oresti will speak to you about opportunities we have in funding for the topic that we have today, and your donor services rep will follow up with you shortly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our president and CEO, Lisa Schroeder. Lisa, when you are ready.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Schroeder, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Foundation, and I thank you so much for being with us today, virtually. As you may know, our foundation has been making grants to childcare and out-of-school or OST providers for decades. These organizations make it possible for families to work and thrive because they know that their children have safe and supportive places to learn, to play, and to become the brilliant, engaged people they are meant to be. But with all the pandemic-related disruptions of the last 18 months, OST and childcare providers have been challenged as never before, managing not only their stated missions, but providing meals and other basic needs while complying with ever-changing public health recommendations for staffing, cleaning, and PPE. Today, we will hear directly from a few outstanding OST providers about how they're rising to these challenges. I'm so pleased to have Jamillia Kamara, our Program Officer for Education, with us today. Chris Ellis, our Program Officer for Healthy Children and Adults, would also be here, but he's recently become a new dad to baby Theo and is out on paternity leave. Jamillia and Chris know the vital role that OST providers play in the social, emotional, and intellectual well-being of children and their adults. Our hope is that you'll leave here with a much greater understanding of what these providers do for our communities and with a new curiosity about how you may begin to join with us in supporting their vitally important work. With that, I'd like to hand the mic off to Jamillia, who will provide some helpful background, introduce our panelists, and facilitate today's conversation. Jamillia.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Before I begin, I would love to thank our team. This is definitely a team effort. So thanks to the Foundation's Development and Donor Services team, the Center for Philanthropy, our communications team, and program department colleagues, Michelle McMurray and Michael Jonas, for laying the groundwork for this opportunity to share a brief overview of the Foundation's efforts to more effectively partner with out-of-school time providers in support of an equitable educational ecosystem. I would also like to thank our esteemed experts, Dr. Cynthia Wallace of Bible Center Church, Keysha Gomez of Hope for Tomorrow, and Casey Mindlin from STEM Coding Lab, for the willingness to share what they are learning from the students and families they serve. Today, I'm going to focus my brief time with you all, and it's going to go lightning fast, so hold on to your seats, offering some context regarding how the Foundation defines out-of-school time programs, how the history of the sector has intersections with racial equity, the value of out-of-school time programs to families, the Foundation's grant making in this area, as well as what we're learning from providers, particularly as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, I'll share a few next steps before we transition to a panel featuring our esteemed guests. Okay. Out-of-school time programs serve children and families during, before, or after the school day, in addition to summer months. These programs generally strive to improve students' academic performance, address challenging behaviors, or support positive youth development. Some programs actually combine all three in a hybrid model. When we consider the current landscape of out-of-school time, it's really important to reflect on the history of the sector, which was influenced by three primary factors: the rise in workplace rates for women, new laws regarding compulsory attendance for children at school, and the resulting dynamic that occurred, which was increased juvenile justice involvement for students between the hours after the school day ended and before the adult workday ended. These factors led to increased juvenile justice involvement for children, leading to the formation of the first boys' clubs. You may now know them as Boys and Girls Clubs, as well as settlement homes. However, access to these programs has not been equitable historically. These initial programs were specifically targeted for the children of European immigrants. And while there were programs for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, otherwise known as BIPOC communities, these programs were typically funded by individual donors, meaning that they did not develop capacity over time. These seminal funding disparities have persisted. And today we see an out-of-school time sector in which BIPOC students, particularly Black students, make up the majority of attendees in the least resourced programs. And that overall, philanthropy has not systemically embraced smaller out-of-school time providers, leading to boutique organizations with high demand from their communities, but without the flexible resources to support scaling their operations. In 2016, through the Small and Mighty Grants program, the foundation began building relationships with out-of-school time providers to better understand their needs. Many of these orgs are now supported through the education portfolio. And over the last 3 years, these out-of-school time organizations have emerged as a key partner in the ecosystem of educational supports for vulnerable students in our region. These providers have helped the foundation expand its understanding of what it means to truly support holistic educational opportunities, which are often already interwoven into the curricula of high-achieving school districts. As such, the foundation's out-of-school time grantees utilize three programmatic models primarily: an academic model, a positive youth development model, and a hybrid model that combines academics and positive youth development. All of these models support things like teacher professional development, as well as systems navigation support for immigrants and refugee families, in addition to the supports that you think about when you think of out-of-school time programs like academics. Speaking of families, it's really important to consider the value of these programs to the families that they serve. According to the Pennsylvania After School Alliance, 71% of families say that they support out-of-school time programs because it keeps their kids out of trouble, which, if you remember our history lesson, falls right in line with what we heard. 83% of families support OST programs because they give working parents a peace of mind. And if we consider this statistic in the context of the pandemic, we must highlight the undeniable impact of these learning hubs that sprung up, provided by our out-of-school time providers without additional resources, to maintain safe, all-day learning spaces while students met their employment obligations. Here, it's important to mention childcare. Shout out to my colleague, Chris Ellis. Out-of-school time programs pretty much function like childcare for school-age children for families that would otherwise not have access to it. 77% of families support out-of-school time due to the STEM activities it provides, and each of our providers has been able to interweave STEM into the program offerings they offer. And 88% of families support public funding for out-of-school time, but it's really important to note here that the application process for public funding is so onerous that it often blocks these providers from getting the funding, meaning that those dollars are not utilizable. A 2016 quote from a conversation with an out-of-school time provider sums this up nicely. They said, "When we talk to parents about what is important to them, it's not the things on funders' lists. They're happy about the food, they're happy their kids are safe. We have to look at it from the funder's perspective because that's where the money comes from, but it's also important what families value." In March 2020, the world shifted for each of us with the COVID-19 pandemic. The education system was immediately disrupted, but our out-of-school time providers shifted with few extra dollars to make the change. The foundation connected with 16 of these core providers 75% of which were Black-led and serving, 44% of which had budgets under 600,000, and 31% of which were grantees from the Small Mighty Grants program. This map shows the locations of those providers, and the pins are over communities that coincide with the fewest financial resources and the largest amount of families experiencing poverty. They include Homewood, the Hill District, the North Side, Wilkinsburg, and Clairton, among others. So to review, we know the seminal disparities in out-of-school time funding and why they exist. And we know that the foundation has not always well understood the needs of providers. This graph shows our continued investment in small providers between 2014 and 2017. You'll notice that there was no out-of-school time grant making in 2016, as it was the year the program department had conversations with providers. Since then, we've increased our investments in out-of-school time programs from $73,000 in 2017 to $545,000 in 2020. Most notable is that now our portfolio is comprised of 67% of organizations that have budgets under 600,000 and 55% of organizations that are Black-led providers. This grant-making activity is directly informed by both the history of the out-of-school time sector, as well as feedback from grantees. Since 2018, the foundation has made 24 out-of-school time grants totaling just over 1.2 million. As far as our next steps, the foundation will continue to work with our partners like the United Way of Southwestern Pennsylvania to fund out-of-school time grantees and highlight bright spots in terms of partnerships between these providers and the school districts they worked with. Aligned with the foundation's value of racial equity and the historical context of the sector, we will continue to prioritize funding for organizations serving students experiencing poverty in inequitable educational environments. And as part of our efforts to evaluate the impact of these programs, we'll continue to encourage providers serving students attending Pittsburgh Public Schools to become approved, which means that they'll have access to grades, disciplinary referrals, and attendance, which offer one way to measure student progress over time. Overall, we're going to keep listening. The foundation's value of voice states that communities that are most impacted by a challenge should also be at the center of creating solutions. And so these providers will continue to inform our approach to understand the needs of the students and families they serve. As we brace for an uncertain educational future, if we care about providing safe spaces for students where they have trusted relationships with adults and can flourish academically and developmentally, if we care about supporting families who need to work but lack childcare, and if we care about remedying the historical trajectory which placed some out-of-school time programs on an all-star pathway while others struggle to meet their operating goals each year, then we'll work together to dutifully fund these programs to increase flexible support for grassroots out-of-school time organizations with an emphasis on small organizations, Black-led organizations, and those operating within a racial equity frame. So as you make plans for the holiday season, consider starting a conversation about the out-of-school time sector with the history that you now know. Talk to your friends about how it's impacted both the childcare sector, the employment sector, and the educational sector, and learn from our panelists today about ways that you can continue to work with us as we continue to learn more about what is possible for students. The future of a thriving educational sector will not be possible without a thriving out-of-school time ecosystem. And so with that, I want to pass it over to our panelists. That time went super, super fast. And I want to give our panelists an opportunity to talk about their organizational missions as well as the work that they are doing. So once again, if each of you want to wave while I say your name so that the folks who are in attendance today know who you are. We have Casey Mindlin from STEM Coding Lab, Dr. Cynthia Wallace from Bible Center Church, and Keysha Gomez from Hope for Tomorrow. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see each other a bit better. Keysha, why don't you kick us off with an introduction? So your name, the name of your organization to review, and a one-sentence mission. I know it's super tough to keep it to one sentence, but in the interest of time.
Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Keysha Gomez. I am the co-founder, along with my husband, John Paul, and the executive director of Hope for Tomorrow, where our mission is to develop the youth in the West End in partnership with their families to compete and succeed in the global community by addressing academic, socioeconomic, and relational risk factors. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Keysha. Casey?
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Casey Mindlin. I'm the executive director of STEM Coding Lab. STEM Coding Lab is the only nonprofit in Pittsburgh that's exclusively devoted to providing computer science education for our region's under-resourced youth. Our mission is to equip Title I students with the digital skills they need to be prepared for the digital economy. Thanks again for having me.
Wonderful to have you. And Dr. Wallace.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Wallace, and I'm the executive director of Bible Center Church's The Oasis Project. And our work is focused in the community of Homewood. And really, I guess a one-sentence mission would be that we're here to create an oasis. And so a space of peace, happiness, and safety in the midst of trouble and difficulty. And so we work with children, youth, and their families.
Wonderful. So as you all reflect on your experiences, how would you say the out-of-school time sector helps to support developmental and academic outcomes for students and the ability of guardians to maintain employment and provide for their families? Anyone can jump in.
I can start. I mean, I think just the partnership with schools. And so, being an out-of-school time provider, we are not trying to take the place of schools, but really partnering. And there are some communities where children and families, and it by no fault of their own, are just not receiving everything that they need during the school day. And so I think that really is the role of out-of-school time providers. And I think our role is just expanding. I mean, there's the academic piece, there's learning loss, there's also the social and emotional learning and, just the attention that we need to give to children to make sure that they are just okay emotionally. And I think that isn't, you shared some of the data initially, just a relief to parents knowing that their children are in a safe place so that they can work, which really just, helps their families. So I'll leave it there.
Great. Keysha, Casey?
After you, Keysha.
All right. So for us, Hope for Tomorrow is near and dear to our heart. We started it because we are the families who we want to serve. When Hope started, my husband and I had 3 children. We've had 3 since, and we needed a place for our children to be able to go that was safe, that was sound, that helped them academically as well as providing life skills to them. And we could not find that. And so when you see a problem, you do what? Fix a problem or try to be a part of that repair. So we started Hope for Tomorrow, and we have grown to learn the needs in our community, which include, like Dr. Wallace said, working with the school system. Our school here, we've had shutdowns and have consolidated all the schools into one, and they need our help as well as providing those life skills. So when we look at Hope for Tomorrow, about 99% of our students and families are African American. When you look deeper into it, about 70% of our students come from a single parent home, usually a single mom home. And then when you look deeper into it, about 90% of those single moms work. So when they're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're getting their kids ready and up for school, and many of them having 4 to 6 children that you have to get up, ready, off to school safely. You then have to go to work and work an 8-hour shift, mostly at a very stressful job. And then you have to come back home, get home by 6 o'clock, get dinner prepared, get them ready, do homework and everything else. Where does that help come from? And that's why we're here. We're here to provide that academic enrichment, to provide that safe haven, and even those life skills that can be missed when we're leaving it just as the burden to the family. So out of school time programming in our community is a huge deal.
Thanks so much. Casey, anything to add?
Yeah, well, first let me say, in terms of what we've learned, both in the past 15 months as well as since our founding, I want to say that we have been lucky enough to benefit from the example of our OST neighbors and folks who I believe represent the gold standard in OST programming. And 2 of those organizations are represented here today by Pastor Cynthia and Keysha. So thank you both for all the work you do. I think that it's, OST programming, quality OST programming has long-term yields that can be measured in dollars and cents. Like according to a recent Pennsylvania Joint State Government Commission report, for every dollar that's invested in after-school programming in Pennsylvania, a return to the taxpayer of $6.69 is delivered in benefits associated with reducing high school dropouts, teen pregnancy, substance abuse disorder, crime delinquency, and the list goes on. So, that's one data point I wanted to share, and just specific to STEM Coding Lab, as with many of our OST neighbors, we serve as a vacancy filler for kids who wouldn't otherwise receive computer science education during the school day. And we work with Pittsburgh Public Schools, charter schools, community centers. We even bought a bus, which I'll tell you guys about a little bit later. And we are able to exercise the flexibility necessary to deliver our programming in an effective and trustworthy manner. There are over 20,000 open computer science jobs in Pennsylvania today alone, yet less than 50% of K-12 schools in Pennsylvania offer a foundational computer science course. We're just not doing what we need to prepare our underserved, under-resourced students for the future of work in the digital economy. So we exercise flexibility, but we're also serving wherever we can as the vacancy filler kids need to be prepared. You're on mute, Jamillia.
It's been 15 months and we're still learning how to unmute ourselves. I love that you started on the question of voice. As I mentioned in my commentary, voice is very important to the foundation. And so I'm wondering, Keysha and Dr. Wallace, what have been some pieces of feedback or aspects of learning for your organizations over the last 15 months that are informing how you're approaching the future of your out of school time work?
Keysha, do you want to start?
Sure thing. So for us, we connect directly with those whom we serve, right? So we have our stakeholder meetings with those in the community, including the business owners, the churches, the schools, and the things like that to find out what they think our programming should offer to the families whom we serve. Then we bring that back to our families, right? So we go and we talk to the moms and the dads and the grandparents and all of those guardians to find out, is this what you have in mind that you think that your children should know? And that's what's relevant to them at this time. And then we take it a step further and we bring it to our children. Every single time we offer our programming, we always sit at a round table with the youth who we serve and find out, is this something that you need to know? And then help them mold how we do it, right? So right now, with the pandemic hitting last year, was our first year in 10 years that we did not offer our regular out of school time programming. And the feedback that we got, it kind of gave us the assurance that what we do is needed. We were able to drive around in our community, and I live where I serve. So I live here in Sheridan, and I'm able to drive around and just see the kids running around and kind of getting themselves in trouble, right? So they're going into local stores and they're stealing, or they're in the middle of the street. And this just happened last week. They're in the middle of the street and they're kicking balls at cars that are driving by. Why? Not because they're bad kids, but because they don't have anything to do. And that's been happening for the past year. And it makes us know that we need to get back in there. And if we open the gym to have rec time, that's needed. Or, we partner with STEM Coding Lab. If we need to bring them back in to do the roboting and things like that, that has to happen, because idle hands do what? You find things to do with them. So the voice, we know that voice is important. We believe in that. Again, we started it because of that, and we need to continue doing that. We've had a gap in programming from the summer until now, and it has been a resounding noise from our families that say we need to get back to it. So we're starting 2 weeks from now, exactly 2 weeks from now, with our programming, and it'll get the kids off the street and get them back into a place where they can learn and they can thrive.
I think just to add to that, just echoing so many things that Keysha said, just about, youth in the community and really, needing a safe place for them to be. But I think our program, we've operated an after-school program for a little over 10 years. And really our program has shifted because of voice. really listening to what parents have said. And so, again, when Keysha's talking about the reality of parents who get up extremely early, they're working 8 hours, then, having to provide dinner and homework when they get home. And so we've done a lot to just shift when we started, we said, we're just doing STEAM. We're not doing any homework help. That's for home. Well, after listening to parents, we realized we had to have a component to assist children with their homework. We provide dinner, so many of the basic needs, even as we, shifted at the beginning of the pandemic from after school programming when schools were closed. Doing wellness calls with our families led to a major food distribution effort because our families, confided in us that they, their children were eating 3 meals a day at school. And so when schools closed, they needed food. And so even though prior to that, we were not a food provider, we just shifted and said, how can we get food to our families? And so I think it's important, just as programs evolve, that they're listening to, they're listening to the parents, they're listening to the children. We also listen to the schools to find out, what it is that they need. Are there gaps that we can help to fill? And so even, Casey, talking about, children not receiving and children in our schools, unfortunately, not receiving computer instruction and technology, which is why we partner with STEM Coding Lab and other people to bring those programs to our children, because often, and I think I take, kind of that long look, children don't even know what they're missing. But if we can look and we're like, these are the jobs that are available. This is what you'll need, when you get to high school, things like that, making sure that we're providing those opportunities that children in other communities they have. And so I think really that's what we're doing. And so it's a lot of listening, and it's being able to be flexible. So to adapt our program to meet the needs. Even this year, social and emotional learning, we had children with us in a learning hub all last year. And what parents were saying when they initially talked to us about, can you do a learning hub? It wasn't the academics first. It's they were worried about their children and the missing that social interaction. And so that has been a critical component of our program and will continue to be, because we just want to make sure that children kind of on a holistic manner are okay.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, there's so many points that have been touched on by the panel. I imagine that folks are curious to learn more. I'm wondering, the impact and connection between childcare and out of school time has always been important for families. I think if we think about the history as well as the current context, it's very clear that there's a connection there and a trajectory that has withstood all kinds of transitions in the educational environment. And so I think that one aspect of out of school time programs that folks often miss is that it's not just about the completion of academics. And so I love that each of you have expounded upon the way that you've listened to families in order to better understand their needs and then be responsive to those needs by adjusting your programs. I'm wondering if you could also talk about some of the aspects of out of school time programs that maybe don't immediately come to mind. So Dr. Wallace, I'm thinking about our conversation about your additional transportation costs, for example, or Keysha, your space, whether or not you would have access to space. And then Casey, the logistics of the program when you were in a school versus whether or not you had access to that school. And so just want to give folks a more holistic view of some of the aspects they may not immediately consider when they're thinking about out of school time programs.
So I'll jump in first and then yield to my colleagues. I think things like the basic needs. So we're in the Pittsburgh Public Schools, 2 of the elementary schools. And for the 10 years we've been operating, dinner was provided. Now we began our program in September, but meals just began last week because Pittsburgh Public Schools said they couldn't, because of lack of staffing, get meals to us during after school. And so we had to figure out how to feed 67 children dinner every evening, for about a month. And those are the things that happen. Even the district's decision, our 2 elementary schools are now walking schools. And so making sure when before there was an activity bus that would help to get children home. We need to make sure that children are able to get home safely at 6 o'clock or 6:30, when the program is over. And so there are all of those pieces that, and again, I think just attending to family needs. After you've built these relationships with families, they confide, that housing challenges, job challenges. And so we don't just stop the programming with, we're helping with academic and enrichment. It is also, how do we help to get resources to our families? Because if families aren't okay, children will never be okay. And so if, parents are worried about things or don't have jobs, all of those things, they impact the well-being of children. And so, in essence, it's kind of that social work piece that we do. And it's because families trust us. And so then we, kind of take on that resource role. How can we connect families with other resources that they need? And that's not a direct kind of outcome of an after school program, but that's absolutely what we do because we feel it's necessary.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wallace. Casey, I want to invite you to share a little bit about the bus that you mentioned. I imagine that was in response to some transportation challenges you were experiencing.
Well, yeah, so in partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh, as well as Jerome Bettis's The Bus Stops Here Foundation, STEM Coding Lab is rolling out in February 2022 our new WOW Cyber Bus, Wi-Fi on Wheels Cyber Bus. It is it's going to have a flat screen television in it. It's going to have about 12 workstations with laptops and robotics kits. It's going to have Jerome Bettis's likeness on the side of the bus. And we are going to operate every day of the week in one of the 10 high-rise public housing communities in the city of Pittsburgh. We are going to take the learning directly to the under-resourced children of this region because we have the flexibility necessary to do so, right? And I think a rising tide lifts all boats, and we could not have done this without the assistance of our partners, but therein lies the importance of strong partnerships and trusted collaborations. I would also mention another thing, Jamillia, you talked about sort of centering our focus on student voices and parent voices. We also have a new partnership with Google's Pittsburgh office, in which we are pairing our students with individual Google mentors with whom they meet every week for about 14 to 16 weeks. And we're pairing them with the Google mentors that work in the fields that interest them the most, our students the most, right? Rather than confining them to areas we feel they should be interested in, we listen to them. And if they are interested in cybersecurity, we'll go to our partners at Google and say, hey, who do you have in cybersecurity who's interested in mentoring a kid? And we pair our kids with those experts to not only sort of nurture their growth and their continued learning, but also to build social capital. I think social capital is, or lack thereof, is a foundational reason for generational cycles of poverty, right? And in order to reverse those generational cycles of poverty, kids need to be able to say, not only do I know somebody at Google, but somebody at Google knows me. And that is not just academic growth, but also social and emotional growth that has far too infrequently been prevalent in our distressed communities here in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Keysha, I want to bring it to you because in the West End, we know that the social service resources for all people, but specifically students, are very few and far in between. And we can contrast that to the East End, where there are many, many organizations serving students and families. So if you could just talk a little bit about your experience as one of the only, if not the only, out of school time provider in the West End, and what that has meant to the families and students that you serve.
Right. So we have been for a long time one of the only out of school time programming here. And again, it started in our living room with 6 kids sitting on our couch and has grown now to serving about 200 youth over the past 10 years. And it comes from, again, that need. We saw that there was a need and we decided to fill that need. And to go back to maybe the question you asked before about what we need to help with those needs is location. We have been somewhat homeless, right? Jumping from, if we have to do programming at the park, we do it at the park. If we have to use Sheridan Library, which is a one-room library, we use it over in the corner. And that was kind of okay when we had 10 to 20 students coming. Now that we're averaging about 75 to 100 youth who are coming every single day to find a place where they can do their homework and have life skill classes, we need a location. We serve youth beginning at the 2nd and 3rd grade level, and we partner with them and their families all the way through their 2nd year post-secondary. So we have youth as young as 7, and we have 19 and 20-year-olds who are in our program, and serving them looks like providing them dinner when they come, academic enrichment for an hour, a different life skill each day that's age appropriate. So in one room, you'll have a 7-year-old learning about the value of money, where in another room, you have a group of teenagers and college students who are learning about buying a car, buying a home, and that needs space. Bottom line, we need space, and that's a big deal for us because we're partnering with Pittsburgh Public Schools. We run our program out of Langley K through 8, and sometimes we have 3 classrooms to accommodate all of the students, 3 classrooms in the gym, and we just need more of a permanent home, a permanent location where we can have our partners come in and provide quality service, for our character development, life skills, and financial literacy classes. We need that. Our families need it because we don't just want to say we have something, the kids come and they get something subpar. We need to increase our quality. And that's a big part of it, location and transportation. We take pride in being here and being here for so long. And we always joke around, but we're serious, to our teenagers that they're going to come back from college and take over this organization. And we want to give them something of quality that they can take over.
Absolutely, absolutely. Casey and Dr. Wallace would love to hear about some of the emerging needs coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic for your organizations, or perhaps needs that have been further amplified because of it, as well as just ongoing needs for your organization that would be helpful for our attendees to learn about.
After you, Miss Cynthia.
Okay. So we are, and I think, probably the world is, but we're so concerned about the learning loss that occurred for children throughout the pandemic. And, many of the children, even, pre-pandemic, could be a year, 2 years behind. And so one of the things that we're focusing on, a new partner for us, we're partnering with Sylvan Learning Centers to add some intensified tutoring for students. And so the cost per year per child is going to be about $600, but we're committed to making sure that children not only make up what they missed, but really kind of reset their just their academic self-esteem. We know that if children do not re-engage with school, many will drop out. And there are just so many things when we think about just negative life outcomes that happen if children are not successful in school. But we just need to make sure. And so that's really what we're committed to. So I think we're, kind of covering within program things like the, social and emotional learning. So we have social workers in the program and things like that, but partnering again with Sylvan Learning Centers to make sure that our children make up what they missed and that they're on track moving forward. And so I think for us, that really is the focus for definitely this year and really as long as it takes. We want to make sure that children really are on solid footing and feel confident about their academic ability.
Yeah, I would say that STEM Coding Lab, since its founding, our programming has never been paused or canceled by any of our partners for any reason except COVID-19 closures, right? And I believe firmly that is because we provide a trustworthy and safe learning space for kids who all too infrequently have access to them, right? In the last year alone, we have increased our student reach by 191%, in fact. We've been busy at STEM Coding Lab because, frankly, there are more vacancies out there in computer science education than we have the capacity to fill. And frankly, we've tried to creatively expand our classroom capacity by attracting volunteers from places like Amazon's Pittsburgh office and Google, like I mentioned earlier, but also a professor from Clarion University and a retiree from Covestro who worked 20 years and wanted to stay engaged. So we've expanded our capacity through volunteerism, but our work is rooted in trust, right? And our kids need to trust us to be there every day, right? And if we can't, ensure the infrastructure and the staff capacity necessary to guarantee that presence, right? We're not going to be able to fill the vacancies that are out there. And frankly, we've had discussions, this year we started a program with Stowe Rock School District. We are teaching 16 classes a week in Stowe Rock School District during the school day. So for their 3rd through 6th grade classes, right? And we're just working overtime. And frankly, if I added another school program to our slate of partners, my staff would probably revolt on me. So it's just, it really does require the flexible grant support necessary for us to bring more caring and committed educators into the fold so that all kids can benefit from this CS education like we know their future demands, right? CS education, I'll just say briefly, not only benefits kids' preparedness and skills on that topic, but it's proven through longitudinal analysis to improve their reading, writing, and math skills, right? So there's ubiquitous benefits to it, and that's kind of the state of the union right now.
Can I just jump in? I just want to echo
Real quick,
a little bit.
Dr. Wallace, real quick, because I want to keep us on time. So we're at 9:43. We have 4 minutes before we're going to transition to our Q&A. And so before we transition to our Q&A, Dr. Wallace, can you let us know anything else that our attendees should know about your organizations? And I'm positive that one of the Q&A questions is going to speak to the comment that you were about to make.
Okay, because I was going to put a plug in there for the STEM Coding Lab and professional development of our staff. So building our capacity. I love that. That was the plug. But I think, just for us, really it is, the general support of the program, because we're able through operational support to partner with programs like the STEM Coding Lab and other programs to enhance what we're doing. And so I think I'll leave it there. I think, we're here in the community working to make sure that our children have the opportunities that are afforded other children really across Allegheny County. So I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Casey and Keysha, before we jump into Q&A, any additional aspects of your organizational programming that would be helpful for our attendees to know?
After you, Keysha.
All righty. So I think I don't want to be redundant, but I just want to say that we are serving the youth and the families in the West End where there's a large gap. The help is needed, the service is needed. When the school shut down last year, we were one of the only learning hubs in the West End, and we were able to provide that daily service to the youth who came in, whose families would not be able to go to work if we were not here. In the summer, we were able to provide a summer camp to 100 youth from actually 1st grade through our college students, and we were able to hire the high school and college students to be able to work with us. So ours is, it's a holistic approach to helping to develop the youth and the families in our community.
Excellent. Casey?
Yeah, one really quick thing, we talk about sustainable long-term engagement on the topic of computer science education. We understand that we can't be present in these in the lives of our kids at all times. So we do what we can to provide professional development training sessions for the educators that are working full-time in these organizations, be they schools, OST providers, community centers, wherever, so that when we're gone, these kids can continue to benefit from CS education and the value, the long-term value it will bring. So we're trying to not just equip our students with the knowledge, but also their teachers, so that this can be a sustainable pathway for them moving forward.
Great. I want to thank our panelists first. If I could give you a round of applause that made a bunch of sense, I'd do so. But thank you for sharing your expertise here. We're going to transition to our Q&A session. We already have 2 questions in the chat, but we invite our guests to ask questions of our panelists as well. Dr. Wallace, I'm going to come to you. Do you have any favorite success stories that you would be willing to share, or what projects are coming up that your organization is excited about?
Well, I knew I'd say this. So let me just say it. I'm so excited. Our next project, and it is well underway. We are going to start a preschool. And so we have been invited to apply for funding for capital, which is wonderful. And so hoping within the next year and really being able to make sure that children enter school ready. And so we want them to be global thinkers, compassionate people, just have excellent, intact, academic self-esteem. So we're super excited about that. That will be, not only the preschool program, but also providing needed childcare for families in the community, and also working with single mothers who want to be childcare providers themselves. That is a popular in-home business, and we want to make sure that the educational component is there. So I could not be more excited about the project that we are, planning to launch within the next year or so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Keysha, Casey, projects you're excited about, success stories. I know you have plenty of both.
I'll just mention one success story. We launched this summer our inaugural summer camp called CS Explorers, and it was for middle school students across the region, and it was designed to contextualize the varied pathways kids can take to enter into a CS career, right? And in doing so, we focused on 6 topics, six themes: AI, robotics, advanced manufacturing, cybersecurity, data analytics, and animation and gaming. And as a part of that process, we focused a week on each of those topics. And each week, kids would hear from 2 to 3 experts from Pittsburgh's tech industry, right? We brought the industry into the classroom so that corporations and the places where the jobs are can be investors in talent rather than just consumers, right? And in total, the kids heard from 14 different companies, all vying for the attention of a collection of middle school students. It was actually a wonderful thing to watch companies like Google and BNY Mellon and PPG and Shell Games and CMU and more, talk to kids about not just what their work entails, but also the pathway they took to get to the job, so that our kids can put themselves in the shoes of innovators and see themselves as the innovators of tomorrow. So that was really the program that started the Google mentorship partnership that I mentioned earlier. So we're really proud of it and just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Casey. Yes, I was going to say, Keysha.
I'll jump in. So when you talk about success stories, we'd love to mention our entrepreneur program and how we have youth who are starting their own businesses. And we have had our youth who have graduated and gone on to schools like Howard University. But the question was favorite success stories. And I'll say something really quickly that kind of speaks to the heart of our organization. We had a young girl who was 15 years old, who was in a very difficult situation in her home life. She had an 18-year-old boyfriend who was living in the home with them. And she ran away from home because she was having issues, and she ran away to our home. And it's, very emotional because this is a very real story to me and to our community. She ran away from her home to my home with my husband and I. And we took the young lady back home to her mom to find out what the issues were. And that's when we found out she was living with her 18-year-old boyfriend, and asked the mom, why can't you put him out? And the mom simply said to us, he's helping pay our bills. We cannot put him out. And that was heartbreaking to us, because it meant that there are resources, there are needs that are not being met, and that there are resources out there that the mom needed attachment to, right? So we were able to step in, and we weren't the big saviors coming in to do that. We were just able to connect her with services that could help her to take care of those bills that the boyfriend was doing. And through that connection, we were able to keep the young lady in our programming, getting her the academic enrichment, getting her those life skills and things like that for her and her younger siblings. And she was able to make it out of that situation. She was able to go back home. She graduated high school. She's now graduated college. She went to CCAC. She's now a mom. And just that situation, it shows that we made an impact. Mm-hmm. And it pushed us to do a lot more, because there are a lot of youth in our community who are in that situation every day. There are a lot of moms and dads out there who people look at them and say, you're not doing enough. You have to provide more. And they simply might not know how to, or they might not need the help that is needed. And we are hope. We are literally hope for tomorrow, helping ourselves produce excellence. And so that's one of my favorite success stories. It gives me goosebumps every single time, because I can look back at that young girl and ask her to come in and volunteer, or others like her to come back in and hire them to be our camp counselors or things like that. And that just motivates us to know that, we're beyond academics, we're beyond the life skills, we're all of that combined, and we're making a difference to help our families thrive beyond just surviving. So that's my favorite success stories. And projects coming up, we're back for year 11 in 2 weeks, and that's a big thing to us.
Congratulations, and thank you for sharing that with us. Casey, I'm going to give you this question posed by Lisa in our chat. She says, what you all do is amazing, particularly because it is so responsive to ever-changing circumstances. To meet the challenges you describe, can you talk a bit more about additional capacities that would assist you in meeting your missions in sustainable ways? I hear location and space, staff development, and retention. Are there others?
Obviously staff expansion is the main priority at this point. But I think that we've really tried to develop our volunteer program into being a more sophisticated, operation, and scaling that volunteer program requires a refined external communications, strategy and calendar and outreach, method or methods in order to, really bring in the folks who we know are out there, right? I think that there's just not enough time in the day, frankly, to weave all those things together. And frankly, with the limited bandwidth that we do have, we're doing very well with what we got, right? But it certainly could be better. We all could be better. And I think that Pittsburgh is a town that has an abundance of those people who subscribe to the ideology of we all do better when we all do better, right? And so we know those folks are out there. It's just developing a sophisticated strategy and infrastructure to make it happen. And I know we will, with everybody's support. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Dr. Wallace, you want to close us out?
Well, I just think opportunities like this, I have been feverishly taking notes. And so, I'll be following up with Casey after this. I think there are a lot of pockets of wonderful things going on. And I believe that Pittsburgh is a resource-rich community. And so I think really just hearing what the needs are and working together to meet them. And sometimes, it's right in the room. And so again, thinking about the programming that Keysha's doing and Casey's doing, and how can we connect? I think really what for us, and probably most programs over the next couple of years, really needing to have a social worker or counselor on staff. And so I know that many, schools, that's a given, but in many places they're just overburdened. And we're finding that, just that needs to be just a standard position, because there are so many needs that just cannot be met with, the after school staff who are also tending to children. And so I think thinking about our programs more holistically and saying that we need to have someone who can not only work with children and their mental health needs, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, because I just believe everyone needs someone to talk to. You don't need a diagnosis, but also the families. And so again, making sure that somehow that becomes just a standard part of after school programs, because the need is just so great. And so that's something that we've seen. So, yeah.
Great. I want to thank our panelists. We're at 9:56, which means we are 1 minute before we're supposed to close, which is fantastic. Keysha, Casey, Dr. Wallace, thank you all so much to review some of what we heard in terms of needs. We heard a need for flexible support. So if we go back to the history of the sector, we know that flexible support for these organizations is crucial to help them continue to scale their work and to be responsive to the communities they serve. We heard transportation and location. So the logistics of running these organizations is important. We also heard a continued focus on listening to families and students and highlighting those bright spots and success stories to keep us motivated in partnering for the future. So with that, I want to close my portion of our time together and I believe pass the mic to Lindsay, if I'm not mistaken, who will offer an opportunity for you to continue to stay involved. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jamillia, and thank you, Casey, Cynthia, and Keysha for joining us today. The work that you guys do is amazing. And I want to do everything that I can to be able to leverage our donor community to be able to support your work. So I am going to do a call to action here to the donors on the call and donors that might listen after today's call. As our providers have stated and shared with us, the COVID-19 pandemic has just exacerbated how much our childcare system needs support. And so the three organizations that presented today, Bible Center Church, STEM Coding Lab, and Hope for Tomorrow, are wonderful, well-established, directed, and vetted organizations that I highly recommend our donor support. So please consider a grant from a donor advised fund to one of these organizations as we head into the giving season. Also, the Pittsburgh Foundation has been supporting many out-of-school time providers through our programming. And here is just a fairly lengthy list of ones that we've supported in the past that are all worthy, well represented and vetted organizations in this community. As Cynthia, I think, said, we're a resource-rich community, but the needs are great. So I really encourage you as donors to lean on our expertise and to look at the organizations that presented today, as well as many other resources within this community. So thank you for joining us. It is 12:58 on my screen. So we're getting you off on time. I wish everybody a pleasant fall. And if you need any further information from the Pittsburgh Foundation, please don't hesitate to contact your donor services representative. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.